Hello everyone, your friendly neighborhood cat here. Hope you're doing well and enjoying Cloud Matsuri so far, having had your fair share of cosplay, Crunchyroll, and industry. But for now, let's change the pace a little bit and focus a little bit more on another creative aspect, comics, particularly comic artists. So grab yourself a hot drink or Diet Coke or milkshake or whatever takes your fancy. I've got some coffee, we've got some Coke there, and get settled to hang with me for an hour for some good chat and artistic banter while we present to you a live drawn session with none other than the wonderfully talented Craig Paton, artist of the award-winning Killtopia comic. Craig, how's it going? It's so good to
Oh,
have you here, and thank you so much again for joining us.
good, no problem. Thanks for the invite.
So today we're going to be doing live drawing, and it's actually like something that I personally find really interesting being an artist. So we'll hopefully like get to chat about several things, and obviously you can talk about what brushes you use, as everyone asks, and yeah, talk about other things.
Wonderful.
So let's go. Okay. So yeah, Craig. To start off, tell me a little bit about yourself and background and how you came to become a comic artist.
Um, I'm a comic artist and illustrator, and I'm mostly known for doing the artwork on the Killtopia graphic novel series and doing my kind of cyberpunk style artwork. But before I got into that, I was a professional, like a regular professional illustrator for about 10 years. Where
Oh, nice.
I did work for like just kind of general commercial clients like bars and restaurants or the local council, just whoever paid me money really. Did that for like a decade, as I kind of thought that was kind of the only way to get uh, work from doing art. But when to begin with, what I really wanted to do was to be a comic artist. It felt like back say like 10, 15 years ago, the idea of being a successful comic artist was like trying to be a successful rock star. Like it just didn't.
Yeah, yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine.
But now with like indie comics and Kickstarter, it's so much more accessible. So I kind of took the chance when I could to kind of tone down the professional illustration gigs a bit and move more towards what I actually wanted to do in the first place. Which has been really fun.
That's really cool.
That's like the past 3, 4 years now. I've been working exclusively in comics. So I'm going to be very happy to hear that.
Do you feel that you're like sort of your illustrate like as you can see here when you're drawing
Hmm.
that your illustration knowledge like has transferred over to when you're drawing characters for comics and such?
It's definitely been a benefit. Yeah, when I was doing illustration stuff, it was a lot more of a kind of painterly style. So all the kind of stuff that I went into learning how to paint properly, learning my perspective, painting proper shapes, three-dimensional shapes, all comes in really useful for my comic art drawing.
It's good to have it that you can be versatile with your skills across the board so that you're not entirely jumping into like a new sort of area of creativity without being able to like bring over the knowledge. And it just shows that I guess for people that if they decided to jump into like another career, there's still skills and aspects that they can carry over.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of kind of like transferable skills and knowledge. Um,
Yeah, that's great.
I think if I had gone straight into try to be a comic artist, like straight out of art school, I think there's no way I'd have been as competent an artist as I am now. I feel like I learned
Yeah.
a lot during the time when I was working as an illustrator, like especially on like the professional side of things, because there's so much at art school that just doesn't prepare you for the real world at all. Like so many things you have to discover on your own, mistakes that you have to make on your own to get the benefit of experience.
Definitely, I absolutely agree with that as well. It sometimes feels that like you learn, like you say, you learn the most after you finish like your degree, or even if you didn't have a degree and you just go straight into learning outside of that kind of
Pretty much,
curriculum.
yeah. As soon as you leave art school or university, or what, it's like suddenly there's this massive steep learning curve as you go into the real world, and I think that's kind of like really discouraging for a lot of artists and demotivating for people. A lot of people quit at that point. Like,
Yeah.
you can, if you're stubborn enough to hold on, you can get through the mistakes and the failures and stuff, and learn from it. Kind of keep on to making money as a professional. That makes sense.
Like you say, it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Do you find that as like as a challenges as an artist? Do you feel that that's obviously you've had to learn a lot when you've been creating comics, and like even how you're drawing now? Just was it years of practice before you got to your sort of quotation mark, like the style that you found now and the sort of voice that you have when you create stuff for Killtopia?
But a style that I have now that I used in Killtopia is like it's kind of like a tribute almost to like all my kind of favourite artists. So it's like when I was doing illustration stuff, I didn't really have a style. I would just do what was necessary for the job. So when it came to like being able to do my own thing, when me and Dave were making Killtopia, it was just like I just kind of did what I wanted to do, what I felt like was a more personal style to me, and it was all my kind of top influences and from my favourite artists that went into kind of creating that look.
Yeah, like you say, a tribute to all your favorite artists and like influences. And do you have, is this like your set style, or do you find, like you're saying, when you worked for illustration, that you can easily adapt to other styles necessary?
I think this is like my default style now because I put a lot of focus on trying to enjoy what I'm doing now rather than in the past where I would have just been working because it was a job. Now I feel like I can appreciate the importance of enjoying the artwork you do, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a style that kind of works for me, that lets me kind of create the artwork that I want to do that makes me happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's that borderline of doing what you enjoy as well as I guess doing what you do for work, and it's some for some people I guess working as like doing creative stuff for work,
Mm.
that's like what makes them happy. But then sometimes you just don't have time to do your own things, and I guess you're really lucky that you could make Killtopia and this is your career, and
Yeah,
you've made it to what you thought was like a bit of a dream like 10, 15 years ago kind of thing.
yeah.
It's yeah, it's good, and it's good to see as well that sort of progression from different like similar creative to
Even from like a kind of professional aspect, it feels like a recent kind of revelation that I realised just how important it is to enjoy the artwork that you create, because that kind of it seems to kind of come across to people, even if it's like on a subconscious level. If you're happy with the drawings and the artwork that you're doing, there'll be some kind of level of appeal to other people. It's kind of hard to put a finger on. But
yeah, absolutely.
it seems to work. Like happy artists are the ones that tend to go on to make the best work.
That and it shows really in their work as well, like in your work that you're enjoying it rather than feeling that you're forced to do it or drawing in a way that you doesn't make you happy at all.
Yeah, it puts a kind of human touch and a bit of a kind of aspect of personality into it as well. I think that people can connect to.
Definitely. So speaking about Killtopia, do you want to tell us a bit more about like the world and the comic as a whole?
The Killtopia to begin with was just me and Dave Cook before Killtopia were working on doing. I was doing kind of covers for his comic series, his post-apocalyptic comic series Bust. And while we were doing that, we were kind of talking about what would be the kind of perfect comic for us to both work on. Like we kind of combined all our interests, and like Dave was really big into retro gaming because he was a games journalist before he became a writer. Obviously, I had interest in that, and I was interested in my 90s anime and manga, my comic stuff. So we kind of tried to combine all the best of that and build a world and a style based on us and make the kind of the book we wanted to see out there that didn't already exist. And that was the kind of basis we used to make the world of Cryptopia. It's like it was a combination of retro games, cyberpunk, um, and 90s violent anime.
So all the things you love, and as you said before, all the things you'll enjoy drawing as well.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's really cool. But yeah, the question that most artists hear at conventions and events and stuff is, what brushes do you use? I have to ask it.
Um, I found my answer to this question with a pretty dull one because I use the round hard default brush in Photoshop. That's why
That's the legendary brush though. That's the
it's,
one that everyone uses.
I think there's a point where you need to kind of go and try out every brush out there and maybe find what works for you. But most time, 9 out of 10 times, people just come back to the default round brush. So I'm using Photoshop. I'll always stick with the default round brush. But maybe if I'm painting a bit, I'll put in some texture brushes, or maybe smudge brushes. Sometimes if I'm doing line work, I'll move on to Clip Studio or Manga Studio, what they're called now, and I'll just use a default brush in that, or I'll use a pencil brush or something. But mostly, like 99% of the time, I'm just using the default hard round brush with a bit of opacity, like I'm using in the video here, pretty much.
Do you find that like so for sketching you use the round brush as well?
Yeah,
For like your base layer sketch?
yeah. So kind of for sketching, it's a round brush with opacity set to lightness, opacity set to get pen weight. So like the harder I lean, the more opaque it will be. Then I'll kind of work out and refine my sketch that way. And then when I get to a kind of more of a kind of inking stage, I'll use a round brush again, but I'll set it to like a size based on pen weight, and that gives it a more kind of inky, kind of traditional kind of comic booky look. Before we move on to the colour section of the drawing.
Always interesting to see, and it's always good to know that there's like devout hard round brush users out there. I think that's a shout out to anyone watching that does just use the generic brush. I have like you can get millions of brush packs, and browse through them as you say, and then you'll just revert back to the round brush because
It's
it's
just
trusty.
using, kind of keeping track of so many brushes. I've tried out so many like brushes for drawing with, but I always just end up going back to the. I guess maybe it's a comfort zone thing. Like I'm used to using it, so I'll stick to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Every time I try to move on to using a different type of brush, it's like I'm like nah, no, let's go back to the.
Yeah. So as you're saying, going back to your sort of comfort of using that brush, have you ever like you've got your established style as well when drawing. Do you ever find that you sometimes go outside that zone and try and add to the current style you have and explore something that maybe makes you a little bit uncomfortable to draw, or
I guess that's something you kind of have to do to keep improving, is to add stuff to your kind of repertoire that you're maybe not so comfortable doing, just to kind of keep improving your artwork. I guess recently I've been trying to add a kind of bit of the kind of aspect of the painterly style that I used to work in to my comic styles. So I've been doing comic like drawings and then colouring them and then trying to paint a little bit on the top of that to give it more of a kind of 3D-ish element. But then at the same time, I'm also struggling with the kind of sense of motion and emotion in my work. And I feel like that's not the kind of big struggle at the moment. Is to make my characters look as if they're moving, as if there's action going on. I think that's been a big weakness in my work, and I've been just kind of make myself face up to that, kind of face my weaknesses, and kind of try and power through it until it's something I can get good at, or at least competent at. That and just try to kind of convey a feeling or an emotion through an image. I think these are the two things that I've been kind of struggling with for the past year. Try to go outside my comfort zone and tackle what I think is the kind of weakest parts of my artwork.
how do you feel that you're like from the past year like approaching it in terms of, have you like looking up references, are you like watching, maybe going back to like watching your favorite films or reading your favorite books or comics just to sort of explore like the motivation for that?
Yeah, I guess kind of everything every kind of medium or every kind of experience you have kind of adds to your kind of visual library and your kind of inspiration. But it's hard to kind of look out specifically for stuff. It's like you can't really look up tutorials on how to connect to a viewer emotionally. It's something that you have to kind of pick up as you go. And there's not very many tutorials on movement and motion as well. You have to just find an artist that does it well and try and pick out what it is that they do that makes it seem like it's there's movement going on, there's action going on, and try and apply it to your own work. It's kind of difficult and kind of vague almost. It's a bit like when you're dealing with art, like the anatomy and perspective is like the kind of scientific side to it, but then emotional connection and movement and composition is almost like a kind of spiritual aspect of art almost. Or like the real
Yeah.
set rules or science to it. It just works or it doesn't, and it's hard to really tell how.
Finding that balance of like sort of magic formula, because obviously they say a lot of, for when you want to draw comics and things, it's like learn the rules and then break them.
Yeah,
So I guess it's like learning the sort of anatomy and then sort of working from there and sort of
yeah, just,
changing it into your style.
yeah. Breaking the rules is how you kind of give it your kind of special, unique flavor that makes it appeal.
Mm.
Some people will look at that kind of thing just comes naturally. Like there's a few artists out there that they don't really focus so much on traditional art fundamentals and stuff. They just have right out of the box like a style that connects with people in an emotional way and so has a personality that really works and appeals to people. I think for artists like me, I've kind of had to kind of learn it. So, yes, I don't have that kind of natural charisma from my artwork that appeals to people. I have to kind of learn it as I go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the ever-growing journey,
Yeah,
like artistic journey that everyone goes on for whatever they're trying to explore, and
a never ending journey.
yeah, it'll never end. Yeah, we'll be on our deathbeds and like we'll just be like, I
One
haven't
more
figured
drawing.
everything out. Yeah, still drawing, still figuring it out, still trying to find the style. Um, how yeah, speaking of style again, because I think I found that on Twitter and artist communities, a lot of people sort of cling to this idealism of style, and as you say, like your style is an amalgamation of many other like styles that influence you. But do you feel personally like the struggle to find the style is like the be all and end all, or do you think it is like part of like the journey rather than like the destiny?
um, style itself is more like it's kind of like trying to define a style for yourself is almost like trying to define your handwriting style. There's no real point of trying to force it. It's just it comes out from like as I said before, like all your experiences kind of combine together to create who you are as a person, and that comes through in your own style. It's just something that forms naturally. There's no point in trying to force it or try to create an artificial style. Just if you do take on board your influences and then draw in a way that makes you happy, your natural style will develop. And I guess in the end, it's not as important really as knowing your basic art fundamentals and having that emotional connection with the viewers.
So, like as I was saying about the sort of the style and finding that,
Hmm.
as an artist, like the challenges you faced over the years. Obviously, we've touched on how you've transitioned from being an illustrator to a
Hmm.
comic artist, but just throughout your career, is there anything like this, the biggest struggles you've had? Artist blocks,
Um,
the moments where you just want to give up your comic completely, and then you got Dave telling you like, no, don't do it, and sort of like talking you off the edge, and the sort of those moments that it's like we always see the final art online, but we
hmm.
never see the sort of process behind it and the actual work and struggle that goes
Yeah,
into it.
I've always thought it would be interesting if more artists were to share their stories of their failure. It sounds like I kind of, whenever I mention this, people think I'm just being really pessimistic, but I think I learned a lot more from my own failures than I ever did, I think, from my successes. So I think it'd be cool if there was like a kind of collection of famous artists' biggest failures and what they learned from it, so we could benefit from what they gained from their failures. I think the my career, one of the kind of biggest challenges I overcame is learning how to not take a failure to heart and just kind of keep going, even if and I've had some pretty major failures over the years and some pretty humiliating art related disasters. I've kind of had to learn how to kind of take it on board, find out what you learned, and just be stubborn enough to keep at it and remove that temptation to take it personally and think that you have to give in. It's just a case of taking from that situation where you felt like you failed and finding what it is to learn from it, how to grow as an artist and how not to make the same mistake again.
No, absolutely. Like you say, it would be good to just have artists that you look up to and talk about their stories and like all the sort of failures that they had. And I think it's just humanizing that we're not perfect as well.
Yeah, And like
you know.
social media, people won't really talk about their successes. They don't talk about their failures. I guess they're pretty miserable place if people did just all talk about their failures.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's true.
as an artist, it would probably help with like a lot of the imposter syndrome. I think that artists get from you kind of scroll through Twitter and you see artist after artist posting like their amazing finished artwork, and then you're sitting there struggling with your sketch. And it starts to kind of feel like you're the only artist that's not posting huge like successful work. I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges as an artist as well. That kind of constant struggle to kind of convince yourself that you're good, that you're doing well. The more you improve with your artwork, the more your perception of what good artwork is improves, and you never seem to catch up. So as good as you get, you always feel the need to kind of want to get better because your idea of what better artwork has moved on along with your ability. Does that make sense? So it probably becomes like a kind of lifelong pursuit or struggle almost, to chasing the idea of being the perfect artist and try to fight the imposter syndrome.
It's the artist curse. We're never gonna be happy with our own work.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess like talking about challenges, do you find that Twitter and Instagram and like our social media platforms, do you find it so fast paced now? It's that pressure of trying to keep up to date with posting art and content on it? Or are you happy like working at your own pace because it's kind of, I think it's an illusionary thing where
Yeah.
people feel the need to keep up with content, but it's illusionary pressure that people are constantly expecting stuff from you. And I think obviously how quick our social media platforms move, it's almost like you're, like an all you can eat buffet. You instantly like hoard it all, and forgetting the hours that goes into these, like that goes into that kind of work.
Yeah, very much. You don't really see the behind the scenes much. You just see from some artists, it's just like fully finished, fantastic pieces of artwork, one after the other. Like I guess social media is like a curse and a blessing for artists. You need to kind of find a balance because you've got you can make connections with all these great artists out there, and they're more approachable than they've ever been. You can talk to artists that you look up to and stuff, but then you do every day to have this feeds of like awesome artwork, well, can sometimes be inspiring, can also be kind of demotivating because you start to be like, why is not an artwork look, I guess? Why am I not doing like 5 pure finished pieces in a day? But then you don't know the behind the scenes stuff. The fact that this artist has maybe just worked for like a long period of time and then has shared these 5 pieces of artwork at once. There's no point of comparing yourself in that way. Yeah, you just have to kind of find that balance with social media and not get too kind of drawn into the comparing yourself with the other professionals out there. Make sure you're just working for yourself, comparing yourself to what you did before to your last piece of work, rather than what kind of illusion people are given from their social media profiles.
Like I said before, it's that curse, but also it's so hard these days, like you say, to not like avoid trying to compare yourself. And
Yeah, yeah. So you need to take inspiration, but not too much inspiration that can makes you feel inadequate.
yeah, forever struggling. But we need to keep this panel upbeat because we're just talking about cynical things all the time. So do you feel that like Twitter and Instagram are like your two main sort of kind of promotional, and Facebook as well? Facebook
Yeah.
pages like for promoting your artwork on and things.
Before leaving art and ArtStation and like, I think it was just art forums where people would share their work, like
Mm-hmm.
conceptart.org and Crimson Daggers, stuff like that. You need to have like a kind of wee art community, but there wouldn't really be any kind of and outside that community to kind of share your artwork with. So social media's become the kind of ideal place now for that because you get the balance of your art community and those outside, so you can kind of build a fan base almost.
Yeah, it's the pros and cons of the ever fast moving platform of Twitter and Instagram and such. So, have you ever had moments where the fabled art block? Have you ever like? I guess since you're working Killtopia and this is practically like this is your full time work. You ever had those creative slumps that a lot of artists go through, and it's the art block and they can't manage, and it's like how do you find that you get through them, and how long do you normally get them, kind of thing?
I think your kind of down periods, your kind of art block periods is just something that naturally happens when you're trying to progress as an artist. I think it comes from, like I was saying before, like when you if you have an improvement in your artwork, usually your perception of what quality artwork is will improve with it. So you'll start to think less of your own artwork as you improve. And I think with that comes a drop in confidence and your imposter syndrome, and you'll start to develop what you use artist block. But the best way to get around it is just to ignore the artist block and just keep at it. I think maybe something I developed from when I was doing the commercial illustration stuff. It was like if I wanted to get paid and pay the bills that month, I would have to draw regardless of how I felt.
Yeah.
So just draw anyway, even if your artist block is telling you not. Just keep doing
It sounds like hardcore training. It's like
it.
you push
Yeah,
yourself. Climb
yeah.
that hill. Keep
Just
going.
kind of like good advice for going to the gym. Just like Neil Gaiman says, if the best advice for any writer is just to write. So the same applies to art, I guess. Just draw. Just draw. Whenever if you're struggling with art block, just draw and it will go away.
I think for a lot of people, obviously, it's that first step of just trying to push through
Yeah,
that block because it's
just
obviously
finish.
your brain's telling you another thing, and you're like, no, I just want to have a nap. I just want to walk away.
It's good to kind of come back to your kind of comfort zone stuff when you're feeling kind of down. Just do the one draw stuff that makes you happy. Kind of do studies of your favorite artists and stuff. Keep working on it until you're happy again. I guess. I think the more you kind of the more you can develop as a professional artist, the less you get art block because it becomes it's just kind of part of your kind of daily process. Some days you wake up not feeling as good as others, but you just have to do it anyway because this is what you do now. So you don't really consider art block as being a real thing. It's just you're just working in a day when you don't really feel like working as much, which happens in every profession, I'd imagine.
I was gonna say that I think for me, my comfort zone is just drawing profile heads, like a whole page of the same head over and over again. And it's just like you ever find you just have that one thing you just draw over and over again,
That's
even if
very
it's
much me. It's
mindless.
always heads, faces, uh,
Yeah, yeah,
wee heads, like three,
it's just
three
heads.
quarter heads.
Yeah. Oh, the 3/4 head. Which way does your 3/4 head space? Does it like side to the
All these
left or the
guys are
right?
facing to the
To the right. I feel like it's almost like
right.
telling someone's fortune because mine was faced slightly to
No,
the left.
looking from a sketchbook actually, they're pretty much all face to the right. Never noticed that.
It's good that you keep analog sketchbooks as well. I know a lot of people like to work digitally only
Hmm.
or keep digital sketchbooks. So you find that for you, because I know on a personal level, I like the sketchbook because it's just something about pen on paper. It feels organic. Is it the same for you, or is there like other reasons you like to keep just like sketchbook?
I'm not sure if it was just the kind of practical side of being able to carry around a pencil and sketchbook and be able to draw wherever you are without needing to worry about your batteries needing recharged or whatever.
Mm.
Um, I've got my Apple Pencil and my iPad, which I kind of intended to use as my sketchbook that I'd carry around, but I don't seem to use it as much as the traditional sketchbook. I think it's something about just using the pencil and paper that makes it so much easier to get what's in your mind down on paper. Kind of becomes like an extension, from brain through arm to pencil onto page, which maybe is a bit harder to do digitally. Maybe.
Find yeah. Do you have like a massive collection then of sketchbooks that you kept from like years past, or do you rip pages out and get rid of them, or do
Uh,
you just keep them all as
I
relics?
have a tendency to kind of to hoard sketchbooks. So I've got a ton. The house has just been full of them. I used to collect every piece of artwork that I'd ever done, but over the years, through various art-based tantrums, I've ended up throwing them out. And I think
Oh
it's probably a good
no.
thing I did because eventually my house would just compose entirely of sketchbooks and folders full of artwork. So some stuff had to go eventually. I guess that's one of the benefits of digital artwork because things don't pile up as much physically.
Yeah, less of that imprint of just having millions of randoms, even if it's like millions of the same head in one sketchbook. Okay, you started coloring. Do you find that obviously you'll have set color palettes, say for flats, for your characters and such? do you is coloring, obviously being an illustrator, do you coloring is like, everyone has a stage of drawing where maybe sketching's their favorite, or line art is their favorite, or flattening colors is their favorite. Do you have like a preferred stage that you enjoy the most, or do you find all of it equally as like enjoyable?
I think now I kind of find it all equally enjoyable, but I went through a major phase of being afraid of colour for like a good long while.
Really?
Like, I would only draw or do stuff in grayscale, do stuff in black and white. I just felt like once I was getting into colour, I was intimidated by it almost. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. It seemed like there was so many options, I didn't know where to start. But now, I think when I'm doing colour, I don't kind of consciously go for like a set palette, but then when I kind of set all my pieces of artwork, when I kind of line them all up together, it does look like I end up kind of settling for quite often the same kind of colour schemes, or the same kind of colour wheel harmonies. So I'm kind of going back to the same kind of comfort zone with colours again over and over.
Yeah.
I think I'm using the same here again. I always go for the purples and blues, kind of contrast with the skin colour.
Have you ever had that moment if you've tried different color schemes? You're like, oh, it looks fine to other people, but to you, you're like, I'm not comfortable about this at all.
Yeah, I guess you feel kind of insecure with colour sometimes. Like maybe you'll use a colour scheme you don't think is indicative of your personality, maybe,
Hmm.
and you keep kind of coming back to what's worked before. I just finished a piece last week where I tried to just use one colour pretty much. It was like
Hmm.
it was all pink on a white background. It was for a deluxe robot thing that I did last week from a sketchbook hard code, and it seemed to work. I've not really done a full finished piece just focusing on one colour before, and it seemed to work. Quite happy with that slight deviation from my usual comfort zone colour.
You were saying that you obviously were afraid to use color before. How did you just, was it just practice that you eventually sort of worked your way to overcome that, or did you like, look up tutorials, or did you look at artists that you admire and take from them?
I think there's a few artists that really inspired me with colour. I went back to like Mobius as a favourite artist of mine, and whenever I'm struggling with something, my mantra is always like look how Mobius did it and try and copy it.
Hmm.
So Mobius is a big influence on how I did my colour, and also the artist Johan Gonzalez. He's another cyberpunk artist, and the way he used colour was really kind of inspiring for me because he wouldn't use literal colours. He would kind of use a colour related to the mood or the style of the illustration, and I guess that was like a kind of revelation for me. Like you don't necessarily have to stick to the kind of mundane literal colours. You can go for a more of a colour palette that suits the tone, and I think that seeing his work kind of made me less afraid of colour and allowed me to kind of incorporate it more into my work, and how we developed that Killtopia style when we were putting that together.
Think you'd ever like, if you went, obviously took on another project beyond Killtopia, you think you might try something that's completely different color palettes to what you normally do, or do you think you would just like bring over all the sort of colors that you really like from Killtopia
I
into
probably
the next project?
I do like to kind of like build on top of what I've already learned, but if I did a kind of project where another colour scheme worked best, I'd do it. I keep thinking about going on to doing a horror comic, and I guess if I did that, the
Nice.
colour style and tone would be completely different from Killtopia, so it'd be interesting to try. Maybe like a monochrome with a single colour or something, that kind of cool.
Yeah. So it's the best of both worlds. You still get some color, but you get to work in monochrome and
Yeah.
like
Well,
back to where
that's
you
like
were
a
before.
total neon horror comic, which would be kind of cool. Like
Oh
a
yeah, that would be
Nicolas Cage style horror.
great. Yeah. So like your approach to drawing, like when you're started, like where do you start and like what do you think about?
Um,
You know.
but every kind of artwork I do tends to start just in my sketchbook with my pen and pencil drawings. I'll sketch everything out in a kind of doodly thumbnail form first. That's the best way to kind of get the kind of general composition and flow and feeling right before you go on to start the actual finished artwork. So I'll go through pages of pages of just like doodles and sketches, just try to get the feeling right for the artwork. Before I take it on to Photoshop, and I'll draw it again, but with more of a focus on 3D shapes and getting the perspective and the anatomy right. So once I've got that done, the next stage will just be trying to be kind of taking into consideration stuff like line, style, and personality of the drawing before moving on to kind of inking and colour stage. After colours, I'll add a bit of shadow to kind of help further define the shapes and the kind of 3D illusion. And recently I've been trying to kind of add painterly elements on top of that comic style, kind of trying to enhance the kind of 3D look without going too Photoshoppy. I feel like that early point in the process where you're working on your thumbnails is probably one of the, it's kind of simplest, but probably one of the most important parts of creating your artwork. And you need to kind of retain the feeling that you create from that original thumbnail right through to the end of your artwork to kind of keep that emotional connection like I was talking about earlier. The more your finished artwork relates to the initial sketch idea you had to begin with, the more of a kind of emotional connection and flow your finished artwork would have.
I guess I would understand, but like I imagine everyone watching
Yeah.
understands as well, especially like readers of your comic and readers of other comics. So like again see the finished project, but like the amount of thought and emotion that goes into it,
Yeah.
and how important thumbnailing is, because it is like that's you're getting the basic concept across for your final thing.
I'm not sure how good I am at explaining it, so it's got to try to put feelings into words, really, which I'm.
Yeah, it's a visual language. Do you find that, like, have you ever, obviously, your thumbnails and stuff, have you ever found that when you've done the final drawing that, like, it's that kind of curse, like your sketch versus your final piece, sometimes it doesn't quite line up to what you expected?
Definitely, sometimes I'll feel like I'm kind of getting towards the end of a piece of art, and I'm thinking this is alright, this is going well. And then I look back at the original sketch. No, the original sketch is so much better than the finished. I've lost something here, and I can't tell what it is.
Yeah.
Usually, just rather than start over, I'll just have to kind of keep in mind, like keep referring to the original sketch to kind of keep that kind of the original feeling that you were going for. It's been difficult.
Yeah, I think it is like that illusion that obviously your mind fills in the blanks in the sketch.
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying, going back to refine it and be able to just make it how you want.
Yeah. Sometimes with your sketch, because it was rough, the mind kind of fills in the blanks, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you come to do the final art, you're filling in those areas where the mind would have filled in. So you're having to kind of define bits that weren't defined in the sketch. And sometimes that can, if that goes wrong, you can kind of lose the connection somewhere.
Yeah.
Like too much definition can maybe be a kind of detriment.
Like, have you ever found it, like, yeah, like you're saying, too much definition, like, when you overwork a piece,
Yeah.
you find you have to, like, scale it back a bit, or, like, almost, like, undo the hours that you put
No,
into it, or...
I think I'm really bad for overworking stuff, especially if I feel like I'm struggling with something, if it's not quite there, I'll just put time into it, just sit there for hours noodling and try to perfect it. Overworking it almost always makes your artwork look bad. There's very few occasions where I think I've been unhappy with something and I've just sat down and worked on it and eventually come out with something that I was happier with. Usually it's always a case of having to kind of scale back and find out where you went wrong in the process and try to bring it back from there.
Have you ever found that you've had to, like, reluctantly scrap an entire, like, piece and start again, or have you never had to go to that point?
Way too often. In the project I was working on recently, in a hard code sketchbook, when I started working on that back in like March, I had this kind of schedule planned out to kind of build up towards launching the Kickstarter in October, but when I started in March, I just kept doing like piece after piece. I kept scrapping because I couldn't get the kind of the look that I had in mind. As much work as I've done in this project, I've already done more what I've scrapped.
Oh man.
So I ended up one of the stretch goals for the Kickstarter ended up being like a kind of a behind the scenes book, just so I could have something where I could put all these scrapped artworks that I've been doing, like kind of some of the characters that I developed, but looks slightly differently. It just didn't really work. It's like a digital pile of scrapped artwork.
Really cool. Again, it alludes to the whole being able to see behind the scenes and like
Mm.
the thought process, like even stuff. It's funny because people, even though you were like, "Oh, it doesn't fit" or you don't like it, obviously a lot of other people enjoy seeing that insight
Yeah,
and think it looks great.
yeah. It is kind of quite frustrating when you scrap something to go in a different direction, and then eventually one day you show the scrapped version, and people are like, "Oh, I like that better than the finished one."
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And you're like, "Well, tough." It's too late now. It's years down the line. Do you think you'll go back and use maybe your scrap concepts for maybe something else then? You know?
I could do, I guess. I don't think I ever have gone back and used something that was scrapped before, or at least not in whole. But I can kind of take from it as what I've learned to kind of move on. Just pretty much every piece I'll always make some kind of mistake that I'll be able to kind of learn from and build on. And the scrapped pieces are just another part of that, another kind of step in the art progress journey.
Do you find it when once you finish a piece, you're like, obviously we were talking about overworking, but
Hmm.
you have to just walk away from it for like a few days and then come back and be like, okay, I can look at this again.
So definitely before I'll share anything, I'll always leave it for like 24 hours. Like I'll upload it to my iPad and then I'll go for a sleep. And then when I wake up, I'll look at it on the iPad, and it seems like just that kind of that few hours distance and seeing it on a different screen. Any kind of mistakes or things I'm not happy with will like really kind of jump out. So having that little bit of distance can really help when you're adding
Yeah,
the kind of final tweaks, improvements to your work.
just come back with a fresh mind about it, just in case you've accidentally, like added like just something you weren't even aware of because you were tired and it was 2 a.m. and then
Yeah,
just be glad you hadn't sent it to print and then the next day you're like, oh yeah, I've added an extra toe on or like an extra finger.
that'd be a nightmare.
I think for people watching that want to obviously get into comics and drawing, I've been kind of focusing on the challenges and the approach because again, behind the scenes stuff that you normally don't see on Twitter, you only see one side, you only see the good stuff on
Yeah,
Twitter. And I'm trying not to keep this cynical, but it I find it interesting, so I hope everyone else does. But yeah, like we've talked about scrapping stuff, we've talked about like like working your style and things. Is there any sort of like things that you would want that like from your experiences that you think is crucial as like to impart as knowledge to others?
I think some kind of things that I've learned recently, like when I've been working on Killtopia, I've made a kind of major kind of improvement to my work. So I've kind of like some of the kind of less scientific kind of revelations, like having your kind of enjoyment of your work and how important that is, and how that kind of comes across in a kind of non-specific way to appeal to others. That's been kind of majorly important. That and having to draw on a confident style or just a kind of confident way with confident lines. It's kind of like a forced confidence almost. You have to kind of if you draw with confidence, even if you're not confident, you'll still come up with better lines than you would if you're kind of uncertain or scratchy. Like your enjoyment and your confidence as an artist, like kind of it comes into play in the appeal of your artwork. And I think recently that's the kind of revelation that I've discovered from my own successes and mistakes that has made a big difference. It's something I've kind of focused on a lot on recently. If I was going to give advice to start an artist, I think I would try to explain that, but explain it better than I have now. Try to be confident, try to enjoy what you're doing, and your artwork will benefit. and try not to lose that confidence and enjoyment when you're kind of getting into the more scientific elements of drawing, when you're doing your perspective and your anatomy and stuff. Just keep the confidence and enjoyment going, maintain that balance.
Were you the sort of person where have you been drawing since you were a kid, kind of thing, since you could hold a pencil, or was art something that you got into later, maybe in your early teenage years?
Yeah, I was a little kid drawer. I guess like most artists, I like to kind of pretty much as far back as I can remember, I've always been drawing. I didn't always consider it as a career though. Like when I left, well, I always drew through school and stuff and did all the art courses and stuff. But then when I left school, I kind of was a little directionless and didn't really consider going into art as a career because the background it seemed like a kind of unrealistic thing, like as if I wanted to be an astronaut or a rock star or something. So it kind of seemed more sensible to just you know bum about and get whatever minimum wage job I could before I realised that this doing art was something I had to kind of come back to and I had to take seriously. Um, and I had to kind of put things in motion to try and get into art school and make a career of it. So it's kind of like the only kind of interest had that would be able to develop into a career. I've always struggled with doing any work that wasn't related to making my own artwork.
A lot of people love seeing, like you were saying earlier on, like a lot of people love seeing sketches, sort of behind the scenes stuff. So I think it's good because, like you were talking about, the emotion that you put through in your art and the sketches and that, and it's almost kind of raw for them to see. Like it's almost like a diary, I guess. They get to read your like diary
Yeah,
in a way because it's all your sketches and concepts. It's stuff that you don't see the final product of, and that's like such a cool thing to do. I wish, like, I know a lot of artists do sketchbooks, but I wish there was just even more. Like, I would buy them all because it's just my favorite
yeah.
part.
I definitely like seeing sketchbooks of my favourite artists. I always find that there's so much more you can learn from seeing what artists have kind of chosen not to do as well as what they have done. I've seen their kind of work in progress stuff and the sketches and the things that
Mhm.
they've scrapped. It gives a good kind of insight into their thought processes and stuff, which can be kind of inspiring.
Perfect.
So that definitely I'm really interested in seeing the sketchbooks and work in progress sketches from our artists. There's stuff to be learned.
The final drawing looks amazing, and obviously you've put in a lot of like details, but not overworked it. For Killtopia, when you've been working on panels for the comic and such, do you have like, have you found that you spent more time on certain panels, or do you give like each panel the same amount of love, so to speak? And have you ever wanted to like overwork panels, or do you sort of try and like, what is it, work smart, not harder kind of concept, where it's like you have a set coloring thing that you have for the comic.
I guess in a kind of if you're working on a kind of long projects like Cutopia, you have to have elements of both for like what works smarter rather than harder or faster rather than perfect. But yeah, what you're saying about the attention each panel gets with some panels are for like kind of key panels important to the story, they'll maybe get more attention than others. Or if it's a part where kind of time's maybe moving slower, you might need more detail in the panel to kind of keep the eye drawn in to kind of give the impression that this isn't an action scene. Time's moving at a kind of regular pace. I guess I can be kind of bad for maintaining a steady pace with artwork because I can kind of get drawn into the trap of overworking things, over detail on things. It kind of ends up pulling me behind schedule a bit. Maybe like just slowest artist on earth sometimes. Yeah, you need to kind of maintain that balance of quality and speed, which can be a struggle I find. So sometimes maybe it's better just to have like maybe one panel a page that you put your focus on, and then the other panels just done first, perfect second.
It is like the finished not perfect rule,
Yeah,
so to speak. because obviously the speed that a reader goes through a comic is different to looking at a final illustration.
Yeah,
So like you say, it's that understanding of they're not going to like see the absolute tiny blade of grass details you've put under someone's foot because they've already like read that
yeah,
panel.
and especially with like if it's an action comic, like putting in more detail is just going to be a detriment because the more detail you have, the more of an impression that time is slower
Hmm.
in a comic. Like if you're capturing the eye into those details, and the reader's going to think this is a this is a panel where time is moving slowly. So if you've got an action scene, you want to kind of give the impression that things are moving quickly, so less detail works better.
Absolutely. And on that sort of like aspect, for people that are inspiring to make comics, like whether it's, trying to get in with a publisher or like independent comics or such, do you have like good advice that you would want to give them?
Well, for me, with getting into comics, has all been about independent comics and creating your own stuff. And Kickstarter's really helped with that. If I'd had something like that when I was younger, I think I would just have gone straight from school straight into making comics. And it's with the kind of the community and the internet and social media as it is, you're able to kind of create and send your stuff out there without really having a traditional publisher or any kind of like gatekeeper entry to comics. The only thing you have to do now to be a comic creator is to make the comic and show it to people.
Yeah, that's the biggest step, isn't it?
Pretty much. There's no need for middlemen or traditional publishers so much as there used to be. I mean, it helps to get a publisher when you reach that stage and you need to distribution and stuff. But if you're wanting to get started, it's just a case of making comics and making sure people see them.
So Kickstarter is a platform for funding like especially independent comics, and as you said before, cutting out the middleman. Do you find it's easily accessible for a lot of artists that, as you're saying, that wish to get their comics out on a more sort of more wider distribution, just on a more wider distribution to the general public, or do you find that maybe starting self printing and then selling on Etsy to then gain the footing to start a Kickstarter more important?
um, well, I've not really kind of I don't have much experience with an Etsy shop, but for me, Kickstarter's been super important in getting my comics work out there. So this has been the case of just you just have to kind of create the work and kind of connect to people through your social media and sell your or promote your artwork that way. Um, and like Kickstarter's been fantastic for that. It's almost like Kickstarter's like become one of the kind of biggest publishers of comics recently without really being a publisher. They've
Mm-hmm.
kind of beginners come in, kind of create their own work, and it's up to the comic fans or the consumers to decide what's worth their time, what's worth their money. And it seems like there's a big market and a big audience out there for stuff that's made by kind of kind of first time creators or kind of create their own content. People really like that connection with the artist and writer rather than selling through the middleman, like we said before. It's like somebody said that the connection direct with the original creators. But this is supposed to be the major from Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, amazing! Yeah.
It's my kind of own version of her from a kind of fan art that I did a while back.
That's all the time we have for this session. Thanks again for me, Kat, and of course Craig for joining us and showing us his process. Really hope you all found that just as insightful as I did. And those inspiring to create comics or even just be artists in general, I really hope you found this motivational. And finally, Craig, where can we find you online?
I'm Craig Paton on Twitter, and I'm Craig Paton Illustration on Instagram.
Cool.
My name's aren't terribly imaginative, so it's quite easy.
Yeah. So it's easy to find you online. And that's amazing. Thanks again so much for joining us.
No problem.
Up next is the Cyber City Uedo making of the Blu-ray panel, which is definitely going to be as mad as you think it is. See you all soon.